Beneath the familiar landscapes of world religions flows a hidden river of wisdom, a tradition that has quietly shaped humanity's spiritual understanding while remaining largely unseen. This tradition is Hermeticism, named after its legendary founder, Hermes Trismegistus, and it offers us what many seekers describe as a blueprint for understanding the very nature of reality itself. Despite its profound influence on countless spiritual paths, Hermeticism remains surprisingly unknown to most people. Those who have encountered it often only know scattered pieces, isolated quotes, principles taken out of context, or watered-down concepts stripped of their deeper meaning. This fragmentation isn't merely accidental. Throughout history, these teachings appear to have been deliberately hidden, distorted, or erased from our current knowledge. The core Hermetic Texts, mysterious works like the Kybalion, the Emerald Tablets, the Corpus Hermeticum, contain insights that go beyond ordinary religious doctrine. They offer a comprehensive map of the cosmos, a framework for understanding consciousness, and a path towards spiritual awakening that shows remarkable consistency across different cultures and time periods. What makes this tradition particularly intriguing is the recurring claim that this knowledge has been systematically suppressed, not because it's false, but precisely because it's so transformative. The suggestion emerges that truly understanding Hermetic wisdom makes people spiritually sovereign, essentially impossible to control through conventional religious, social, or political systems. As we explore Hermeticism, we're invited to see it not just as an ancient historical curiosity, but as a living stream of timeless wisdom, one that offers contemporary seekers a path toward reclaiming aspects of human consciousness that have been pushed aside in our materialistic world. This journey requires us to navigate between verifiable history and meaningful myth, between rational analysis and intuitive insight, a balancing act that the Hermetic tradition itself has always embraced. Our exploration begins at the threshold between what we can prove and what we can know through direct experience, the perfect starting point for a tradition that has always flourished at the boundaries of conventional understanding. Before we get started, if you like this type of content, please remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss a future video. And remember to check out my website, oculus.com. I've also started a second channel with some friends called Folks of Yore. The link is in the description. The focus of the channel is just more mainstream history. We're focusing on the Renaissance for the first few videos, looking at history through the eyes of the people that lived it. The origins of Hermetic wisdom stretch back into the myths of antiquity, with many practitioners and scholars suggesting it is older than history itself. While modern academic approaches might question such claims, the tradition's roots undeniably reach deep into the sacred soil of ancient Egyptian temples, where priests cultivated profound understanding of cosmic principles and their earthly reflections. At the center of this tradition stands the enigmatic figure of Hermes Trismegistus, a name that represents more than just a historical person. According to the various accounts, this figure embodies a fascinating synthesis of two powerful spiritual archetypes, the Greek messenger god Hermes and the Egyptian deity Thoth. Both were revered as divine mediators between realms, guides who can navigate the threshold between life and death, known as psychopomps, and patrons of sacred knowledge. Thoth, depicted with the head of an ibis, was venerated in ancient Egypt as the originator of speech, writing, and divine wisdom. Hermes, with his winged sandals and caduceus staff, served as the swift messenger between gods and mortals in Greek tradition. Their symbolic merging in the figure of Hermes Trismegistus suggests not merely cultural syncretism, but a profound recognition of universal principles transcending cultural boundaries. The epithet Trismegistus, meaning thrice great, carries multiple interpretations. Some historians believe it originated from the Egyptian honorifics, while others suggest it refers to his threefold mastery as greatest priest, philosopher, and king. More esoterically, it may indicate mastery of the three worlds, divine, celestial, and earthly, reflecting the tradition's emphasis on correspondence between different levels of reality. Rather than viewing Hermes Trismegistus as simply a historical individual, many scholars now understand this figure as representing a lineage or succession of wisdom keepers, initiates who preserved and transmitted sacred knowledge through generations. The Hermetic teachings were deliberately protected through symbolism, metaphor, and carefully restricted transmission, available only to those who underwent rigorous preparation and initiation. Those who follow the path of Hermes Thrice Great sought something far beyond ordinary religious devotion or intellectual understanding. Their quest was nothing less than cosmic illumination, a direct experience of the underlying principles governing all existence. This perspective helps explain why Hermetic knowledge has historically been preserved within mystery schools and esoteric circles, rather than through public institutions of learning. The concealment of Hermetic wisdom was not merely elitist gatekeeping, but a recognition that certain forms of knowledge could be misunderstood or misused without proper preparation. Just as contemporary approaches to psychedelic medicines emphasize set and setting, the ancient Hermetic teachers recognized that transformative wisdom required appropriate context and readiness to be properly received and integrated. The written corpus of Hermetic wisdom presents us with a fascinating tapestry of texts that bridge multiple cultural traditions, historical periods, and metaphysical perspectives. Scholars have traditionally organized this literary heritage into two complementary streams, each offering distinct but interconnected dimensions of Hermetic understanding. The first category, known as the technical Hermetica, encompasses practical applications of Hermetic principles in fields such as astrology, medicine, botany, alchemy, and ritual magic. These texts, which some researchers date as far back as the 2nd to 3rd centuries BCE, reveal how Hermetic understanding was applied to engage with the material world and its subtle energetic dimensions. Rather than seeing these practices as mere superstition, we might recognize them as sophisticated methodologies for working with the correspondences between microcosm and macrocosm that lie at the heart of Hermetic philosophy. The second category, often termed the religio-philosophical Hermetica, contains the spiritual and metaphysical teachings that form the philosophical foundation of the tradition. Composed primarily between the 1st and 3rd centuries CE, these writings explore profound cosmological questions, the nature of divinity, and the spiritual journey of the human soul. They offer not merely abstract speculation, but transformative contemplations designed to awaken deeper levels of consciousness within the reader. Within this rich textual landscape, several works stand as pillars of the tradition. The Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of 17 profound dialogues, serves as perhaps the most comprehensive expression of Hermetic philosophy. These dialogues, often structured as conversations between Hermes Trismegistus and disciples such as Asclepius, Tat, and Ammon, explore the nature of the divine mind, the creation of the cosmos, and the path of spiritual regeneration. The Asclepius, preserved primarily in Latin translation, offers complementary teachings on divine animation of statues, the Egyptian temple tradition, and prophetic visions regarding the future of Hermetic wisdom. The ancient anthologist, Stobaeus, preserved additional fragments that complement these core texts, offering glimpses of teachings otherwise lost to history. Perhaps most enigmatic is the Emerald Tablet, or Tabula Smaragdina, a cryptic text containing the famous Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, a profound distillation of the correspondence principle that represents a key to Hermetic understanding. This text, though brief, has inspired centuries of contemplation and application across numerous esoteric traditions. The modern understanding of Hermeticism underwent a profound renaissance during the 15th century when Italian humanist scholars, most notably Marsilio Ficino, translated the Corpus Hermeticum under the patronage of Cosimo de' Medici. During this period, Hermes Trismegistus was believed to be a contemporary of Moses, endowing the Hermetic Texts with profound historical authority. This chronology positioned Hermeticism as a Prisca Theologia, an ancient theology anticipating and paralleling Christian revelation. This historical framework was later challenged by the philologist Isaac Casaubon, who in 1614 dated the Hermetic philosophical texts to the early Christian era, the 1st and 3rd centuries CE, rather than to ancient Egyptian antiquity. While this revised chronology diminished the tradition's historical authority in conventional scholarly circles, it did little to undermine the philosophical coherence and spiritual potency of the teachings themselves. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi text in 1945 sparked renewed scholarly interest in Hermeticism. These findings reveal connections between Hermetic thought and other contemporaneous spiritual currents, suggesting a rich cross-fertilization of ideas in the ancient Mediterranean world while simultaneously confirming the distinct character of the Hermetic path. The transmission of Hermetic wisdom through the corridors of time has not proceeded unimpeded. Rather, this tradition has navigated a perilous journey through periods of intense suppression, deliberate misinterpretation, and systematic marginalization. To comprehend the contemporary fragmentation of Hermetic knowledge, we must examine the historical forces that have sought to constrain its influence. Forces that reveal much about the potentially transformative nature of these teachings. Throughout antiquity and the medieval period, religious institutions and temporal authorities recognized that systems of knowledge conferring spiritual autonomy posed implicit challenges to established power structures. The Catholic Church, as it consolidated its doctrinal authority, increasingly regarded Hermetic teachings as heretical, not necessarily because they contradicted Christian revelation, but because they offered pathways to divine understanding outside ecclesiastical mediation. This theological tension manifested in concrete historical actions: the burning of texts, the condemnation of practitioners, and the isolation of Hermetic manuscripts within Vatican repositories, accessible only to the initiated few. Some historians suggest that the suppression intensified during periods when Hermetic principles gained broader cultural traction. When alchemical pursuits inspired by Hermetic correspondence theory flourished in medieval Europe, church authorities often branded practitioners as sorcerers engaged in forbidden arts. This characterization profoundly misrepresented the spiritual dimensions of authentic alchemical work, reducing a sophisticated spiritual technology to mere metallurgic experimentation. The forces of suppression compelled Hermetic practitioners toward increasing secrecy, giving rise to cryptic symbolism and the formation of esoteric brotherhoods. Organizations like the Rosicrucians and certain branches of Freemasonry became vessels preserving fragments of Hermetic wisdom, often in forms increasingly detached from their original context. This necessary adaptation for survival contributed to the fragmentation of the tradition, as teachings became encoded in increasingly obscure symbolic languages accessible only to initiates. Despite these formidable obstacles, the Hermetic current continued to flow through Western esoteric tradition, resurfacing in multiple cultural contexts. elements of Hermetic wisdom found refuge within the mystical dimensions of established religions, in Kabbalistic teachings within Judaism, in Sufi contemplative practices within Islam, and in esoteric interpretations of Christian scripture. This cross-fertilization ensured the preservation of Hermetic principles while simultaneously diffusing them across diverse spiritual frameworks. Perhaps most remarkably, Hermetic principles profoundly influenced the development of early modern science. Figures like Isaac Newton, whose public image has been carefully sanitized of esoteric associations, devoted significant attention to alchemical studies grounded in Hermetic principles. Leonardo da Vinci's integration of art and science reflected the Hermetic understanding of correspondence between different domains of knowledge. Giordano Bruno, ultimately burned at the stake for his cosmological views, drew deeply from Hermetic sources in developing his vision of an infinite universe infused with divine life. The suppression of Hermetic wisdom reveals a persistent historical pattern wherein knowledge empowering individual spiritual sovereignty has faced resistance from institutions dependent upon mediating the relationship between humanity and the divine. This pattern suggests not the marginality of Hermetic thought, but rather its profound significance. A body of knowledge deemed too transformative to circulate freely within societies structured around centralized religious and political authority. At the heart of Hermetic philosophy lies a remarkable conceptual framework, a set of 7 fundamental principles that together constitute what might be understood as the operating system of reality itself. These principles, most accessibly articulated in the modern Hermetic text the Kybalion, represent not merely abstract philosophical propositions but dynamic keys for unlocking the deeper structures of existence. Each principle offers both a descriptive understanding of cosmic processes and a transformative tool for conscious evolution. The first is the principle of Mentalism, which stands as the foundation of Hermetic cosmology, asserting that the all is mind, the universe is mental. This principle suggests that consciousness, rather than matter, constitutes the fundamental substrate of reality. Far from being merely a philosophical abstraction, this principle invites us to recognize the universe as a mental creation, a vast field of intelligent energy, in our own minds as microcosmic reflections of this universal intelligence. Through this understanding emerges the recognition that thought itself possesses generative power, that consciousness shapes the very fabric of experiential reality. The principle of correspondence, encapsulated in the famous Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as below, so above, illuminates the holographic nature of existence. This principle reveals that patterns replicate across different scales and dimensions of reality, establishing intricate relationships between the macrocosmic and microcosmic realms. The movements of celestial bodies, the cycles of natural systems, and the inner landscape of human consciousness all reflect corresponding patterns. This principle offers more than theoretical insight. It provides a practical methodology for navigating between different levels of understanding. The principle of vibration declares that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This insight, remarkably aligned with contemporary physics, recognizes that apparent solidity masks ceaseless vibratory motion. From subatomic particles to celestial bodies, from subtle emotions to profound spiritual states, variations in vibratory rate distinguish different manifestations of reality. The practical implication extends beyond mere description. By consciously working with vibrational frequencies, the Hermetic initiate learns to transform consciousness and influence material conditions through resonance and harmony rather than force. The principle of polarity reveals that everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. This understanding transcends simplistic dualism, recognizing that apparent opposites are actually extremes of a single continuum, differing in degree rather than kind. Heat and cold, light and darkness, love and hate, all represent varying expressions of unified underlying phenomena. This principle offers profound alchemical potential, as it enables the transmutation of one pole into its opposite through conscious navigation of the spectrum between them. Mental alchemy becomes possible as the practitioner learns to transmute negative emotional states into positive ones through understanding their fundamental unity. The principle of rhythm acknowledges that everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. This principle illuminates the pendulum-like oscillation manifest throughout nature, in ocean tides, seasonal cycles, historical epochs, and emotional states. Rather than resisting these natural rhythms, the Hermetic adept learns to work with them, recognizing that periods of activity must balance with restoration, that expansion must complement contraction. This rhythmic understanding enables one to rise above unconscious subjection to cyclical forces by establishing conscious equilibrium amidst the cosmic dance. The principle of cause and effect states that every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. This principle dispels the illusion of chance, revealing the universe as a domain of causality operating across multiple dimensions. While acknowledging deterministic processes, Hermetic understanding transcends fatalism by recognizing that conscious awareness allows for navigation among causal chains rather than mere subjection to them. The initiate strives to become a conscious cause rather than an unconscious effect, operating from higher planes of causation to influence lower manifestations. The principle of gender asserts that gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. This understanding transcends biological sex, recognizing complementary energetic polarities functioning throughout creation. The masculine represents the directive, projective, and initiating force, while the feminine embodies the receptive, formative, and nurturing qualities. True creativity emerges through the balanced integration of these complementary principles, whether in artistic expression, spiritual development, or the cultivation of relationships. This principle reveals the profound truth that wholeness requires the harmonization of apparent opposites within consciousness itself. These 7 principles do not function in isolation, but constitute an integrated framework for understanding and engaging with reality. Together, they offer not merely an intellectual framework, but a transformative technology for conscious evolution, a means by which the individual might align personal consciousness with cosmic principles, thereby participating consciously in the creative processes of existence itself. Beyond the 7 principles lies a rich tapestry of philosophical concepts that form the multidimensional landscape of Hermetic wisdom. These concepts address the nature of knowledge, the structure of reality, and humanity's unique position within the cosmic order. Together, they create a comprehensive metaphysical framework that has quietly influenced Western philosophical and spiritual thought for centuries. At the foundation of Hermetic epistemology stands a crucial tripartite distinction between 3 modes of apprehension: episteme, nous, and gnosis. Each represents a progressively deeper faculty of knowing, forming a sacred hierarchy of consciousness that guides the initiate toward divine realization. Episteme refers to intellectual knowledge acquired through reason, logical analysis, and sensory observation. While valuable for navigating the material world and providing conceptual frameworks, this mode of knowing remains limited to the realm of appearances and cannot by itself penetrate the essence of reality. The rational mind, operating through episteme, can approach spiritual truths conceptually but cannot directly apprehend them. Nous represents a higher faculty of perception, often translated as divine intellect or intuition. though both terms inadequately capture its full significance. In the Hermetic tradition, nous functions as the vehicle through which the human consciousness may directly perceive universal truths beyond rational categorization. Unlike episteme, which processes information sequentially and discursively, nous apprehends holistically and immediately. It serves as the luminous bridge between human awareness and divine reality, the receiver of the universal light that illuminates all true understanding. The cultivation of nous enables the initiate to transcend the limitations of rationality without abandoning clarity and precision of thought. Gnosis constitutes the culmination of spiritual cognition, direct experiential knowledge of divine reality achieved through the activation of nous. Unlike both intellectual knowledge and even intuitive insight, Gnosis represents not merely an elevated form of understanding, but a transformative participation in which is known. Through Gnosis, the knower and the known enter into mystical union, dissolving the illusory boundaries of separate selfhood. This sacred mode of knowing cannot be transmitted through texts or teachings, but must be directly experienced through deep contemplative practice and spiritual purification. This epistemological trinity, episteme, nous, and gnosis, reveals the multidimensional nature of human consciousness and establishes the trajectory of Hermetic spiritual development, from rational understanding through intuitive illumination to transformative realization. The Hermetic path values intellectual rigor, but recognizes it as mere preparation for the more profound modes of knowing that constitute authentic spiritual awakening. The Hermetic tradition distinguishes itself not merely as a philosophical system, but as a comprehensive path of spiritual transformation, a sacred technology for the conscious evolution of the human being. This path integrates conceptual understanding with experiential practice, offering methodologies through which the initiate might progressively realize their divine potential while navigating the complexities of embodied existence. The spiritual journey begins with the cultivation of the 3 levels of knowing previously described, each requiring specific practices and disciplines for its appropriate development. These faculties do not function in isolation, but rather form an integrated apparatus of spiritual cognition, each supporting and enhancing the others when properly balanced. The Hermetic practitioner works simultaneously to refine rational thought, awaken intuitive perception, and prepare the vessel of consciousness for direct divine apprehension. At the heart of Hermetic practice lies the profound recognition that authentic spiritual rebirth requires a systematic transformation of consciousness. Ancient Hermetic texts describe this process in terms of overcoming the 12 tormentors of darkness, symbolically represented as zodiacal influences or habitual patterns that constrain awareness within limited perspectives. These tormentors, representing various forms of ignorance, attachment, and egoic identification, must be systematically transmuted through the application of the 10 powers of light, divine qualities that the initiate progressively embodies through dedicated practice. This alchemical process of spiritual purification and illumination leads ultimately toward what Hermetic texts describe as cosmic consciousness, a state of awareness in which the individual microcosm consciously realizes its essential unity with the macrocosmic whole. This realization transcends mere intellectual understanding or even momentary mystical experience, constituting a fundamental and permanent shift in ontological status, a genuine rebirth of the self into its divine nature. The methodologies employed in this transformative journey draw upon the 7 Hermetic principles previously discussed, applying them systematically as tools for conscious evolution. Meditation practices cultivate the inner stillness necessary to perceive subtle dimensions of reality beyond sensory appearance. Contemplative exercises train the mind to recognize correspondences between different levels of being, developing intuitive insight into the holographic nature of reality. Visualization techniques harness the creative power of imagination to align individual consciousness with cosmic principles. Hermetic practitioners have traditionally employed sacred sound as a powerful vehicle for transformation. Ritual chanting practices, particularly those involving specific sequences of vowel sounds, were understood to establish vibratory resonance with celestial spheres, facilitating the soul's mystical ascent through the cosmic hierarchy. These sonic technologies reflect sophisticated understanding of the principle of vibration, utilizing sound as a bridge between material and spiritual dimensions of existence. The authentic Hermetic path emphasizes that transformative spiritual knowledge cannot be transmitted through texts or teachings alone. While conceptual frameworks provide essential orientation, genuine understanding emerges only through direct experience cultivated through consistent practice. As the Corpus Hermeticum 10 beautifully expresses, for the knowledge of it is a divine silence and a resting of all the senses. This recognition of the limitations of discursive knowledge highlights the experiential foundation of Hermetic wisdom. The cultivation of piety, reverent recognition of the sacred dimension of existence, constitutes an essential element of Hermetic practice. Unlike exoteric religious forms that may emphasize blind faith or mere observance of external ritual, Hermetic piety arises from direct intuitive perception of the divine intelligence manifesting throughout creation. This reverential attitude opens the faculties of perception to dimensions of reality invisible to the profane gaze. An important distinction between the Hermetic approach and certain other mystical traditions lies in its fundamental affirmation of the material world. Unlike systems that seek escape from embodiment into purely spiritual realms, the Hermetic path recognizes physical existence as a valid expression of divine creativity. The goal is not transcendence of the material, but rather its transmutation through the infusion of higher consciousness, the progressive spiritualization of matter rather than escape from it. This view shows that Hermetic spirituality embraces all aspects of the universe rather than rejecting any part of it, aiming to discover the divine essence present through everything. The ultimate aim of Hermetic practice might be understood as the conscious participation in what the tradition describes as the mind of God, alignment with the divine creative intelligence that perpetually manifests the cosmos. Through progressive purification and illumination, the initiate cultivates the capacity to serve as a conscious vehicle for divine expression, cooperating deliberately with evolutionary impulses that guide creation toward ever more complete manifestation of inherent perfection. This participatory understanding transcends both passive mysticism and willful egoism, revealing a middle path of conscious co-creation with the divine. Beneath the visible structures of established world religions flows a subtle current of Hermetic influence, a subterranean stream that has nourished the mystical dimensions of diverse traditions while remaining largely unacknowledged in their orthodox formulations. Tracing these influences reveals not merely historical connections, but profound resonances between seemingly disparate spiritual systems, suggesting the operation of universal principles that transcend cultural and doctrinal boundaries. Within Christianity, Hermetic concepts found expression in ways both subtle and profound, often through the medium of Neoplatonic philosophy that itself had absorbed significant Hermetic elements. The Johannine understanding of the Logos, the divine word through which all things were made, reflects remarkable parallels with the Hermetic principle of Mentalism, recognizing divine thought as the generative foundation of existence. Christ's teaching that as you sow, so shall you reap, mirrors the Hermetic principle of cause and effect, while his instruction to be in the world but not of it resonates with the Hermetic understanding of humanity's dual citizenship in material and transcendent realms. The contemplative dimensions of Christianity, particularly in Orthodox traditions of hesychasm and Western mystical lineages like those of Meister Eckhart and Jacob Boehme, reveal striking parallels with Hermetic approaches to spiritual transformation. These Christian contemplatives often employed language and conceptual frameworks that transcended conventional theological formulations, pointing toward experiential realizations that aligned with Hermetic understanding of divine union. The alchemical tradition that flourished in medieval Christian Europe, while ostensibly focused on material transmutation, preserved in symbolic form profound Hermetic insights regarding spiritual transformation. Within Islamic traditions, particularly Sufism, one discovers remarkable convergences with Hermetic principles. The profound Sufi concept of Wadat al-Wujud, the oneness of being, mirrors the Hermetic principles of mentalism in its recognition that all existence constitutes a unified field of divine manifestation. The Sufi path of spiritual purification, with its systematic practices for transcending the limitations of the nafs, or the ego self, parallels Hermetic methodologies for soul transformation. Ibn Arabi's sophisticated metaphysics of the divine names and their manifestation through cosmic realities bears striking resemblance to Hermetic understanding of divine attributes, expressing through multiple levels of creation. Judaic mystical traditions, particularly Kabbalah, preserve numerous elements that scholars have identified as reflecting Hermetic influence. The Kabbalistic tree of life, with its intricate mapping of divine attributes through multiple worlds of manifestation, exemplifies the Hermetic principle of correspondence in its recognition of structural parallels between different dimensions of existence. The Kabbalistic practice of gematria, discerning deeper meanings through numerical values of Hebrew letters, reflects the Hermetic understanding of mathematical principles as keys to cosmic harmony. The Lurianic Kabbalistic concept of Tikkun Olam, the progressive healing of divine light shattered in the process of creation, resonates with the Hermetic vision of conscious participation in cosmic restoration. Eastern traditions, while it is debatable whether they developed independently, nonetheless demonstrate fascinating parallels that suggest the universal nature of certain metaphysical insights. The Hindu conception of Brahman as the ultimate reality from which all manifestation emerges recalls the Hermetic understanding of the all as the mental foundation of existence. The Taoist recognition of complementary yin-yang principles manifesting throughout nature reflects the Hermetic principle of polarity, while its concept of wu-wei, non-forcing action, aligns with the Hermetic approach to working with rather than against natural principles. The Buddhist emphasis on the mind as both the source of suffering and the vehicle of liberation parallels Hermetic recognition of consciousness as simultaneously the origin of limitation and the means of transcendence. An important distinction must be drawn between Hermeticism and Gnosticism, traditions that are frequently conflated yet differ in significant respects. While both arose in the multicultural milieu of the Hellenistic world and share certain cosmological elements, they diverge fundamentally in their orientation toward the material realm. Gnostic systems typically view physical existence as the flawed creation of a lesser deity, a prison from which the divine spark must escape. Hermeticism, by contrast, adopts a fundamentally world-affirming stance, recognizing the material cosmos as a valid, if limited, expression of divine creativity. This distinction proves crucial for understanding the distinctive character of the Hermetic contribution to the world's spiritual heritage. The influence of Hermetic principles across diverse religious traditions suggests not merely historical transmission, but the existence of perennial wisdom accessible through direct experiential engagement with reality itself. This perspective invites us to recognize these traditions not as competing truth claims, but as culturally distinctive expressions of universal insights into the nature of consciousness and its relationship to the totality of existence. The Hermetic stream thus flows not merely between traditions, but within the depths of consciousness itself, available to sincere seekers regardless of cultural or religious affiliation. The journey of Hermetic wisdom into our contemporary era presents us with a profound paradox, a simultaneous expansion of access and dilution of essence. As we examine the modern manifestations of this ancient tradition, we confront both promising resurrections of forgotten knowledge and troubling distortions that obscure the transformative potentials of authentic Hermetic understanding. This tension between preservation and deformation characterizes the complex relationship between ancient wisdom and contemporary consciousness. With the dissolution of traditional initiatory frameworks that once preserved the integrity of esoteric transmission, Hermetic teachings have increasingly entered a popular discourse, yet often in fragmented and decontextualized forms. The original Hermetic Corpus, a sophisticated integration of metaphysical understanding, philosophical insight, and spiritual methodology, has frequently been reduced to isolated concepts divorced from their comprehensive philosophical framework. This fragmentation diminishes the transformative potential of what was originally conceived as an integrated system for conscious evolution. Perhaps nowhere is this process of dilution more evident than in the popular interpretations of the law of attraction, a concept that derives from the Hermetic principles of mentalism and cause and effect, yet has often been reduced to simplistic formulations of wishful thinking. While authentic Hermetic understanding recognizes the generative power of consciousness, it situates this recognition within a demanding framework of spiritual discipline, ethical responsibility, and alignment with cosmic principles. The contemporary tendency to extract the appealing elements of manifestation while neglecting the necessary foundations of inner transformation reflects the broader pattern of spiritual commodification characteristic of our age. Contemporary spiritual marketplaces offer abundant variations of Hermetic principles, repackaged in forms designed for immediate consumption rather than sustained transformation. These commercialized adaptations typically emphasize immediate gratification of desire rather than the arduous yet rewarding path of spiritual maturation outlined in traditional Hermetic teachings. The ancient understanding that true transformation requires disciplined practice, ethical development, and progressive initiation into deeper levels of reality has frequently been abandoned in favor of approaches promising effortless enlightenment or material abundance without corresponding inner development. This pattern of distortion serves not merely commercial interests but subtler forms of social control. Systems that emphasize magical thinking disconnected from disciplined practice and ethical responsibility tend to produce fragmented consciousness rather than integrated wisdom. The genuine Hermetic approach, which focuses on finding personal freedom by following universal laws, provides a meaningful alternative to both rigid religious rules and commercialized spirituality, though this balanced path isn't widely recognized in mainstream conversations. Despite these challenges, the Hermetic tradition continues to offer profound resources for addressing the existential and spiritual crises of our time. When approached with appropriate depth and integrity, Hermetic principles provide a sophisticated framework for navigating the complex relationship between consciousness and reality. A framework that transcends the limitations of both materialist reductionism and uncritical spiritualism. The integration of rational understanding, intuitive insight, and the direct spiritual understanding that defines true Hermetic practice provides a balanced way of knowing that's become more valuable in our time of divided and fragmented knowledge. The practical application of Hermetic principles in contemporary life begins with the recognition of personal responsibility as the foundation of authentic empowerment. The principle of mentalism, invites us to recognize our participation in the creation of experience reality, not through magical denial of material conditions, but through conscious engagement with the generative dimensions of thought, emotion, and intention. This awareness changes how we relate to life's challenges, moving from feeling like helpless victims to recognizing our power to shape our experiences through conscious choices rather than automatic reactions. The principle of correspondence helps us see the connection between our inner and outer experiences. Instead of viewing our life situations as random or forced upon us from the outside, this principle shows how our internal states, our beliefs, emotions, and ways of seeing shape our external reality. With this insight, we can focus on meaningful personal change by working on our inner selves rather than just trying to control outside circumstances. The principle of vibration shows us how to move beyond our usual mental limits. By deliberately working with vibrations through meditation, sound, movement, or creativity, we can gradually raise our consciousness to match the qualities we want to develop and bring into our lives. This approach goes deeper than just thinking positive, understanding that real change happens when we align all parts of ourselves, our thoughts, emotions, physical body, and spiritual awareness. The principle of polarity helps transform difficult emotions and thoughts by understanding how they connect to their opposites. Instead of pushing away or giving in to negative states, Hermetic practitioners learn to move along the spectrum between opposites. They recognize that any quality can be changed into its complement by consciously navigating the shades between extremes. This offers a balanced approach that avoids both suppression and overindulgence through mindful transformation. The principle of rhythm helps us live sustainably by aligning with natural cycles. By recognizing the inevitable ups and downs in all areas of life, our energy, emotions, creativity, and relationships, we can work with these patterns rather than fighting them. This awareness helps us plan things for the right timing, understanding that apparent setbacks often come before progress. For our unbalanced times, applying the principle of gender is crucial to restoring harmony between complementary energies. Integrating active masculine qualities with receptive feminine ones creates wholeness in both individuals and society. This balanced approach avoids both the excessive focus on domination and control that marks industrial society and overcorrections that undervalue the assertive qualities needed for effective action in the world. As we finish our exploration, we're not at an end, but at a beginning where intellectual understanding must give way to direct experience. The Hermetic texts themselves acknowledge this shift when they say, "The purpose of these writings is not to persuade the multitude, but to cause those whom God has chosen to turn inward." These writings aren't just philosophical texts, but tools for awakening deeper awareness in those who are ready. The Hermetic tradition presents us with a basic choice between identifying with our temporary personality or consciously participating in our divine nature. This choice speaks to the universal human condition, inviting seekers to what one text calls contemplating the divine through the divine part within themselves. Today's interest in Hermeticism reflects deep needs not met by our dominant worldviews. As materialist views fail to explain consciousness and rigid religious beliefs struggle with modern complexities, Hermeticism offers an integrated understanding that values both scientific inquiry and spiritual insight. Its balanced approach to different ways of knowing, rational, intuitive, and spiritual, provides a framework that helps unite our fragmented understanding. The living wisdom of Hermeticism continues to guide those brave enough to move beyond conventional limits, those willing to journey toward self-mastery. For those who engage deeply with this tradition, Hermeticism doesn't offer an escape from worldly responsibilities, but a profound reframing of human experience within a sacred understanding of the cosmos. It reveals a universe filled with intelligence and purpose, not as something to believe blindly, but as a direct experience available through awakening our natural cognitive abilities. Thank you all so much for watching. Your support is really appreciated, so thanks again. If you liked the video, please remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss a future video. Again, check out my website, the link is in the description, and check out my other channel. I'm working on it with some friends. It's called Folks of Yore. I'm doing the narration. We're covering just mainstream history. We're focusing right now on the Renaissance era. We'll branch out to other eras eventually, but there's a lot to cover in the Renaissance. So check that out. A link is in the description as well. It's called Folks of Yore. Thank you so much. Until next time.